Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second video in our series on the demonstration of understanding for gaining the skill set playlist. In this video, you should have already finished your mock study site and analyzing that because we're going to talk about proposing a design of study. Or more specifically, what do I even mean by proposing a design of study? So let's jump right into it. In terms of the design of study aspect is we need something and some variable to think about that we want to research based on your mock study site. And this is going to vary depending on what is available at your mock study site and how it compares to the standard that I'm going to give you right now. So before we get to that though, I want you to think about good research design. So I have a series of steps here, and this also is available to you in presentation form. So if you want to review it later too, is I have a few series of images or study designs that I want us to take a look at. And we're going to see which study design is better and why that might be. So let's look at that first set here. So if I switch here, first thing we need to know is the main reason that we're doing this study. So you're going to have to come up with a purpose. Now these have purposes associated with them based upon the study. So the purpose of this project is to determine the effects of elevation on diversity and abundance of arthropods. So we're studying arthropods, that's our biological component, and we're looking at elevation, our physical variable. Now, if we look at this breakdown, right, we have a topographic area, we have contour lines that are providing us some idea of what the elevation is. If I look at the left-hand side image, I can see that they're relatively spread out in terms of elevation. But if I look at the right-hand side, I notice that the elevation is relatively consistent. So if I want to measure the change or diversity and abundance of arthropods based on different elevations, then I need to also have a variable elevation. So definitely that left one is going to be the better choice because it has more variability in what is actually changing in terms of elevation. Because the elevation is only changing by a couple feet. That's not as helpful nor a good study design. Let's try another one. So this one, the purpose of the project is to determine the effects of, again, elevation. Now we're looking at woody plants, but still elevation. Now I want you to take a moment, look at both A, the left-hand side, B, the right-hand side. Which one is better? Now, hopefully you've guessed it. This one is a little trickier. So both of them have relatively different topographies. However, one of them is utilizing much more area of the study site, which is important. So we definitely want to pick that right one because we want to get as much information about our study site. We don't want to just pick the left-hand side of our study site because that doesn't give us a good, well-rounded data. Awesome. Okay, let's try it again. Now this one has changed because this is written up for birds. So birds are a little different because you're going to be walking a transect, whereas arthropods and woody plants are going to be looking at a park as a whole. So what does your park as a whole have as an average elevation? As blue or birders, you're going to be looking at specific locations within a park. So for example here, we have a study location. Now remember, so think of this study location as Austin, not necessarily like inside an individual park. So I'm looking at the city of Austin here. So my random city. Now, if I pick locations to study my birds, I'm looking at elevation again. And again, we see two things. So one, the lines appear to be varying based on elevation. That's good. But the lines are orientated differently. So one of them is running from north to south, one of them is running from east to west. The issue here is we're studying change in elevation, which means that within a line, that elevation needs to stay constant. So we cannot choose the left-hand side because within that line, the elevation is changing. Therefore, I don't have a consistent elevation to compare between the others. I want within a transect, the elevation to stay the same, but I want the elevation for each transect to vary. So I definitely want to pick that right-hand side as a better design of study. Let's try it again here. Same thing, we're looking at birds. We're looking at elevation. Which one is better? Give you a second. We see some variability, right? Varying elevations. We're going to pick the right-hand side, right? Because that's the same reason that we did in arthropods and woody plants. We have more study area. So we want to maximize as much as we can Now, of course, we're going to be limited based on where the parks are, what's closer to us, what's available, what we can access. That's fine, but we want to do our best to maximize where we can. Now, you might study a different physical variable. So we've been studying elevation. What if we looked at soil type or rock unit type? Now, remember, we need to know exactly what type of rock unit is there, but you'll see that these different colors are representing different rock units. And you see I have some study sites placed. Which one do we think is better? Hopefully we guessed it is the right one, because the left one, if we look at the left one, the elevation or the study sites have two duplicates. So a study site is in orange and another study site is orange. That's not as helpful for me because I want to be able to compare different um, soil types. In your study, for example, you might have, let's say there's two of you working together and you each have 3 parks. Well, then what I would do is one of you has 3 parks in all different explanations, and the other one has the 3 parks in also the same 3 explanations. So then you have 2 parks in every explanation taken by a different researcher. That helps to provide and to eliminate as much bias that we have in the data and to give some good robust data. Okay, so let's try another one. Now this one I also included contour lines to help provide you some understanding of the topography of the area again. Again, we're studying the effects of soil type. Which one is better? So this one is a little tricky. You'll notice that the study sites are already in different types of soil. So that's fine. So that's not changing. What's changing is the location of the study sites. Now you might say that the right-hand side has a better depiction of the park. And it does. It has a much better robust data set of the park or the area. However, there's another changing variable in that instance, the elevation. So if I want to focus on one variable, soil type, I need to ensure that I'm also maintaining other variables constant, or relatively constant. So in this case, the left-hand side is going to be a better choice because the elevation is relatively constant and I'm only changing soil type. Sometimes that's not going to be a choice. You're not going to be able to say like, I only want to um, study soil type. You might not be able to have that choice. So if you have to include 2 variables in your name, that's okay. You can say study the effects of soil type and elevation, which is totally fine. So let's look at the example with birds again. We've got the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Which is better? Which is better? Now, if we look at explanations, okay, they're both in different explanations. Same argument though as the last one. The right one, the elevation is changing drastically. The left one, the elevation is staying constant. And since my purpose is to study soil, not elevation, I would pick the left one. And that's how we're designing studies. We want to ensure that we have some clear method and placement of where we're choosing our parks or choosing our locations. And that's what I want you to be thinking about as you design a study for this mock study site, so we can get some uh, experience doing that so that we're prepared to do it for our biodiversity project. Because we're going to provide a sample, and we have to ensure that that sample is robust and diversified and not biased so that we get a good understanding of the actual population. Now for this study, since you only have one study site, your mock study site, I want you to choose a physical variable to study in comparison to Walnut Creek Metropolitan Park. So you're going to have to look up some of the variables associated with Walnut Creek. You don't have to do a mock, you don't have to provide any details associated with it, like list up how close it is to urbanization, what its elevation is. You might want to provide you might want to provide just an average elevation if that's the variable you're choosing, but you don't need to like write up a site description on it or analyze it as in-depthly as you did your mock study. So that is going to be your goal as part of designing that item. Now, as you move through, once you've figured out your kind of design a study, you do have to include some extra items to our document. So just like we went through each of those purposes, that's a good example to start. Use those as examples to help you come up with a purpose for your study. Second, you're going to make a hypothesis. Make it an educated hypothesis. Now, some scientists like to say we don't make educated guesses. I would disagree with that because I think that making educated guesses is what a hypothesis is. It's not about you just going out and saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. It's about you using your previous knowledge and understanding and experiences to make a guess on what might occur. That might also be referencing literature, but we'll do that later. And then include your design of study, which is a clear mapping of what's going to be occurring in terms of your study site. Why is that variable important and why can you study it? So I hope that was helpful. This is the second video in our series. Feel free to check out the other two as you move through your project. Of course, reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for tuning in.